Morning glory and evening grace, and a very good Friday to you, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, and I want to tell our brand new audience on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, WZPR 92.3, the home of Salem Radio on the Outer Banks, headquartered in Nags Head, that most Fridays we begin with John Ellis, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of News Items. News Items arrives in your mailbox every single morning around 6 a.m., and News Items has between 12 and 15 major stories summarized. It has replaced about 4 newspapers in my life. It's also got about a dozen other links. John Ellis, welcome. Can people try News Items for free for a week if they go over to News Items and Google News Items and John Ellis?
Yes, it's a 14 days free offer, so you get to sample it for 14 days. You do have to put your credit card down, but you can resign or you can, unsubscribe at any time and you get a full refund. So, yeah, go to the website.
I'm telling everyone in Nags Head and the outer, they will not unsubscribe. It's the most important thing I read every day. At the end of every week, John sends me a collection of stories which he thinks are the most interesting of the week. And I am fascinated, John. We'll get to all 4, but I want to start with trontinemab because my father-in-law died from Alzheimer's, and it's not a good way to all.
Yeah, there's this story came from the Daily Telegraph, which is a UK broadsheet and conservative newspaper in the UK. And it's one that I thought would get an enormous amount of pickup, and so far I haven't seen that. But I will read directly from the first paragraph because it's really an important story. And it goes like this: a new drug could halt the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Trials suggest the treatment, which is called trontinemab, could be the most powerful weapon yet against dementia. Research will now examine whether the drug should be given to those without any symptoms in order to prevent the disease. Results presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference in Toronto found the, quote, game-changing treatment can clear the devastating plaques associated with Alzheimer's far more rapidly than any current licensed drug. 9 in 10 patients prescribed trontinemab experienced amyloid clearance within 28 weeks, meaning visible markers of disease had vanished. I mean, if that is what you...
Yeah, John, that is a huge story.
Yeah, it's a huge story, and if you assume that this is they're down the road, they're not at the end point of Alzheimer's research and quote cure, then based on this, you would say in 3 to 5 years they will have at least a drug that mitigates Alzheimer's, and at some point in the near future, one that probably eliminates it. So it's just spectacular.
Over a decade ago, I had dinner with the head of the Brain Research Institute at the University of California, Irvine, and I asked him if they could ever get rid of these amyloids, the tangles that occur. Would people recover their ability to think, and would they have just been like Rip Van Winkle? And he said, that is the great unknown. We don't know. But this drug might do it. I imagine the demand for it's going to go through the roof if it works, if it's approved.
Yeah, I mean, ordinarily when you read stories like this, you look and the sourcing seems a little sketchy, or the conference where it was presented is not the most prestigious conference. But in this case, the medical researchers involved are of the highest ranked, and the conference itself is arguably the most important Alzheimer's conference every year. So we'll see. There's going to be a lot of follow-up, I'm sure, in all sorts of other newspapers and scientific journals. So it's something that we'll be covering.
It's a huge story. I read about it first in News Items, and I do not get the Telegraph anymore, so I'm appreciative of that. Let me then turn to Gallup, another organization with extreme credibility, with a report on thriving around the globe. How do you summarize it, John?
Well, they every year they do what they call the Life Evaluation Index. So rather than judge how people are doing by GDP or income or whatever, they ask people how are you doing, essentially. And they ask them to rate their current and future lives on a ladder from 0, which is the worst, to 10, which is the best. And those scoring 7 or better for the present and 8 or better for the 5 years ahead are said to be thriving. And I will read directly from their report. Worldwide, people in more countries are living better lives and expressing more hope for the future than they have in years. In 2024, a median of 33% of adults across 142 countries rated their lives well enough to be classified as thriving, continuing a trend of steady improvements in life evaluation going back more than a decade. So at a time when we
Now,
are
this is very
inundated with,
consistent with Steven Pinker. Now,
yeah,
Steven
yeah,
Pinker is always telling us things are much better than we read in the news, and this
yeah,
would corroborate that, or is it too much to
yes.
say corroborate?
I think it's just
So,
interesting because if you were to watch, as we do, media, if you were to read it, so on and so forth, the picture that is painted is exceptionally grim, and the way people actually see their lives is remarkably positive. So it's a good
well, let's go
disconnect.
to a remarkably negative story then. I have never heard until I read news items of nitazines. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, although some say nitazines, but it's the
All
latest,
right.
molecules that are so-called upgrade of fentanyl. So, as deadly and as scary as fentanyl is and has been, this is scarier and measures of magnitude uh, more likely to kill you. And that's what the cartels are flooding the United States with. And guess what? The precursor chemicals come from China.
These have been found, I'm reading from John's news item. These have been found mixed into heroin and other recreational drugs, counterfeit painkillers, and anti anxiety medication. Their enormous risk is only dawning on authorities. They kill. John, I've never understood the logic. Why would the cartels want to kill their customers?
I think the addictive. I mean, assuming that they're not trying to kill their customers, they're trying to get them hooked on the substances as quickly as possible. There's that. From the China's point of view, there was an opium war at the beginning of the last century, which they're still angry about, and this is their kind of reverse. Their reverse opium war on the United States. It's not people. People say that, and you say, "Well, that's not true," but it's absolutely true, and it's been referenced in Chinese propaganda. Memory of the opium wars of the early part of the last century, and China is the source of these precursor materials for fentanyl, for this latest update of fentanyl, and it is enormously effective.
I just would never have
70,000.
imagined a drug worse than fentanyl, but it is, and that's bad news. Now let's go to a
Yeah.
piece that will get a lot of people to look up. The top of the market question mark. Now I don't trade. I'm an investor, so it goes up, it goes down. I think at my age I've been through 5 busts. When you say the top of the market and you're going off of Figma, which is a Palantir like a rise in valuation, now at 55 times revenue, the bankers expect Figma to generate in 2026. Is that the froth? Is that what comes before the storm?
I think so. I mean, it's a great website. It's designed for people to create and share and test designs. So you and I would get together and we'd make a mobile app for the Hugh Hewitt show, or we'd make a website for the Hugh Hewitt show, and it's terrific collaborative software. But 55 times future revenues, not future earnings, but 55
Whoa,
times future
whoa.
revenues in 2026 is probably over the top a little bit. And I remember talking to Rupert Murdoch. I used to work for Rupert, and I remember talking to him when he had sold the entertainment assets of Fox Corporation to Disney. So he sold the movie studio, etc. And I asked him why he chose to do that, and he said the market is a bit toppy.
A bit toppy.
A bit toppy. And when you read a story like this, I think of Rupert sitting in his chair, having sold the entertainment assets.
Well,
Fox,
Figma is a bit toppy at 55 times revenue, not earnings. I misread that. John Ellis, always good to see you. Again, for our new listeners and old, if you want to try news items, just Google news items, John Ellis with 2 L's. It will come up 14-day free, and then you can cancel, get your money back. But you'll never cancel. I'll never cancel. Thank you, John. I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and the weekend beckons, and I have 7 grandchildren to take care of this weekend, and therefore I'm taking Relief Factor. Now, I take it every day, actually. I've been taking it for more than 10 years, and they sponsor this show. But if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you just saw me open it. You just saw me put the 4 pills into my hand, and you can hear me even on the Salem Radio Network and all of our wonderful affiliates do this. And I take it. That's how easy it is. All right, 1 sip of water, and I take it. Why do I take it every day? Because carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega is good for you, keeps you moving, gets rid of the minor aches and pains. And believe me, if you lift a couple of 3-year-olds, and the cousins are 3, and they were born on the same day, in fact, and they're packages. And T-Rex Teddy is remarkably big, and therefore, and vibrant, and full of life and enthusiasm. We went to throw rocks yesterday, and predictably my shoulder hurt. But the Relief Factor will kick in, and tomorrow will be a wonderful weekend because it's gorgeous in New England. I want to tell you, Relief Factor works. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com. Find the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com. Also want you to consider this weekend making the switch to Consumer Cellular. Have the savings without sacrificing the cell service that you want and you need. The best way to do it is simply to call 1-800-411-4454. Now remember my name, Hugh, and attach the word 25 to it because Hugh 25 gets you the discount. $5 off each of your first 5 monthly invoices. But before you call, get your phone bill and your cell bill and figure out how much you are paying, how much data you are buying, and whether or not you are using all the data that you buy. Chances are that you're not. Now, Consumer Cellular's main target demo is people who are 50 and older, who just don't use and do not need unlimited data. But if you think you do, if you want unlimited data, you can get 2 lines for $60 a month. That's really a good deal. But you should look at how much you're using. You might only need 5 gigs. You might only need 10 gigs of data. Whatever it is, consumercellular.com/Hugh, or call 1-800-411-4454. Reliable nationwide coverage, savings without the sacrifice, consumercellular.com/Hugh. I was asked to be on Fox News this morning, America's Newsroom, with Bill and Aisha, and so I went on to talk about Mr. Mamdani and his youthful indiscretions that weren't really youthful indiscretions. Here is that clip number 10.
Fox News contributor Hugh Hewitt is here with us now. Hugh, I want to read this political headline for you because I think this really gets at the heart of what is going on here. The headline is, "He once mocked a crying cop. Now he may run the nation's largest police force." And I got to believe that there were some cops out there yesterday at this funeral that were thinking about this and looking at him and wondering, what's up with the 180? We can show you all the tweets. We can make a list and repeat it over and over again. But the question is, are New Yorkers going to buy what he's saying now?
Morning, Aisha. Hi, Bill. I hope not, because when I read that story, I actually went back and looked up the dates of the tweets and what the corresponding timeline in his career was. On December 7th, 2020, he posted, "Defund it, dismantle it, end the cycle of violence." That's remarkably radical, and it's pretty stupid as well, because it connects the cycle of violence to the police who stop violence. He posted it on December 7th, 2020. He wasn't in high school. He wasn't in college. He had, in fact, been elected to the New York State Legislature when he posted, "Defund it, dismantle it, end the cycle of violence." So I know what he's trying to do right now. He said, in this campaign, I'm not going to say what I said after I had won office before. I hope New Yorkers are aware. I hope we repeat it again and again. Defund it, dismantle it, end the cycle of violence, because he is very radical. He is unredeemed. I think President Trump is correct. He will destroy the city of New York if he is the elected mayor. And New Yorkers have got to be aware it can get a lot worse than it already is with Mr. Mamdani if he becomes mayor.
All right, here's the only Republican candidate in the field, Curtis Lewa, on that topic.
He certainly took advantage coming back from Uganda to suddenly rediscover that, everything I said during the summer of George Floyd, that was youthful indiscretion. He believes that today as he believed it then. This is typical political spin. It's like putting the wolf in the chicken coop. He hates cops. He's always hated cops. But now he's guarded by the NYPD and driven around in an SUV. What a sanctimonious hypocrite he is.
Okay, so we're going to see how this goes. They got 2.5 months. A lot of people think Mamdani's a clear winner, but you don't know. I mean, and that's why people vote. Meanwhile, Mamdani has this comment about Israel that goes back 2 years. This is December of 2023. I want you to listen to how he characterizes Israel as a country or not.
Israel is not a place. It is not a country. It's an idea. And you see that in so many politicians' answers to the questions around Israel, is their answers were written 20, 30 years ago. They speak to a reality that does not exist.
I don't know how that's going to fly in a city like New York. Do you?
I don't think it flies, Bill. It is not an idea. It is our strategic ally, the equal of any of our strategic allies. It cooperated with the United States to destroy the rogue Iranian nuclear regime. It destroyed Hezbollah. Israel was recognized by the United Nations in 1948. The United States immediately recognized it. So again, he's radical and stupid. I don't know if he knows the history of the Middle East. No one's ever actually had him in a difficult conversation about Ottoman Empire, British Mandate, the State of Israel in 1948, reestablishing the ancient State of Israel. So it's both stupid and radical. I can't imagine any supporter of Israel, much less Jews, voting for Mr. Mamdani. But there are 4 candidates. I know Curtis. He's an old colleague of mine from radio days. Either he or Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo, 2 of those 3 have to drop out in the best interest of the city of New York and the best interest of the United States.
But it might not matter. I mean, Hugh, all the polling now shows that even if they all drop out, or one stays in and the rest of them drop out, he wins.
Well, we'll see.
Right now.
Yeah.
It's early, though.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I don't know. We won't know until September polling and whether or not Cuomo and or Sliwa drop out, or Cuomo and or Eric Adams. I don't think Eric Adams is going to give up, so I'm going to have to look to my friend Curtis, and he's just an acquaintance. I've only known Curtis for 20 years, but I've known him in the radio business. He's a smart guy. It's his best chance, but it's not a good chance. Webroot.com/Hewitt. I want to tell you about a new sponsor of mine, Webroot, Webroot.com. All my listeners out there, you are right to fear identity theft. It happens every second or 2, 1 or 2 seconds in the United States. Someone snatches your data. They do so from your unsecured phone, your unsecured computer. They do it via the dark web where other people have stolen your stuff from doctors' offices or OPM. They store it on the dark web. It's for sale. That's why you need to get Webroot Total Protection or Webroot Essentials. Right now, you'll get 50% off either product when you go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Different suites of products depending on how many different utensils or devices you use. Get a password manager, get a system optimizer, get identity protection, get $1 million insurance policy. Webroot includes a VPN for up to 10 devices. Get 50% off of Webroot Total Protection today by visiting Webroot Essentials or Webroot Total Package at webroot.com/Hewitt. That's webroot.com/Hewitt for half off. Hope you're having a great Friday. I'm joined by Charles C.W. Cook. He is a senior editor for National Review. He is a podcaster extraordinaire. You can hear him on his own Charles C.W. Cook podcast, as well as most editions of The Editors. Charles, I have had Noah Rothman on this week to talk about trade and tariffs. I've had Matt Continetti on this week, and then yesterday I had Orrin Cass. And I will characterize Noah as classic free economy, Friedman-esque Chicago school, consumers pay. I will classify Orrin Cass as let's try this, and Matt Continetti somewhere in the middle. You and I, we will agree, and we're going to stipulate not to discuss the legal issue. Does the president have the authority? Because there are three statutes. It was argued in front of the federal circuit this week. They'll render a decision maybe a minute. But let's put that aside. I want to know if you are open to changing your mind. Yesterday, Orrin Cass made the argument that national security conservatives like me ought to do what I've already done, which is look at the numbers. We collected $27 billion in tariffs last month. We're going to collect, according to Secretary Bessent, $300 billion in tariffs this year. 10 years ago, we collected $35 billion. Last year, we collected $77 billion. So we're going to triple it or quadruple it over last year and 10 times what it was 10 years ago. I kind of view it now as an offset for maintaining freedom of the seas and the United States Navy. But what do you think? And Orrin Cass made the argument, maybe we're just wrong about the WTO and GATT. Maybe the United States is the big kid on the block and can set the rules. Having set the stage with the facts and the law, what do you think?
Well, I don't agree with that. I certainly agree with the big dog in the race, but I don't think that means that we need to add tariffs. We could just as easily use our capacity to work toward a more free trade world. I do agree that there is a small amount of room for trade policy where it affects America's defense interests. For example, you do not want to have other countries with an upper hand over you in the development of ships and aircraft, or arguably, as we saw with COVID, material you need in a pandemic. But that's not what Trump's doing. It's very telling that when Trump comes out and says that he's putting tariffs on India and Vietnam and Germany and Britain and Brazil, the first thing that those who are generally in favor of tariffs do is pivot to China. They say correctly that China is run by a communist dictatorship. They say correctly that China steals our IP, that China is a threat. I agree with all of that, but that's not a reason to put tariffs on India, and it's certainly not a reason to do it, I don't mean in the way legally, but economically, the way that Trump has gone about this. So I'm just not persuaded by that argument. I think it is responding to a case that hasn't been made.
Well, there are a couple of obvious examples. Let's do the economic ones first. Japan wouldn't let rice, American rice, into their country until this deal. That was not a tariff issue. That was a non-tariff trade barrier. The United Kingdom and the EU wouldn't let American beef in because we used genetically engineered seed. That's the non-tariff trade barrier. Trump, the cow farmers are very, very happy. I talked to one yesterday. The price of beef has never been this high because demand is skyrocketing. What about those examples as opposed to Vietnam, for which I don't have any particular argument, but Japan, UK, and EU?
Well, they're bad rules and they're being bad actors. And I am pleased that those rules are going away. But the argument there is a free trade one. What you're hinting at there is that it's bad to have restrictions on trade. And the consequence of this tariff schedule is increased protectionism around the world. If in a year's time, everyone has slowly bartered down their asks such that we have more free trade than we did before Trump came in, I'll be the first person to throw up my hands and say, I got it wrong. He was the great free trade president. But I don't think that's consistent with what he's done or with his rhetoric here. We are going to end up with American consumers paying higher tariffs on goods from around the world than they were before these changes were made. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, we will know in a year for sure, but is it possible, you've already said you're open to it, is it possible in a year we'll find that the United States had sufficient market power to demand these changes without setting off a trade war between countries B and C and D and E? Think that might happen, Charles?
I certainly hope so. I also hope we're not kicking ourselves in the teeth in that we're trying to get manufacturing out of China. I support that, but we're putting all manner of tariffs on the places that we want manufacturing to go. So I hope that doesn't cause the reverse of the policy I'd like to see.
Charles, I've got 7 grandchildren with me for 3 weeks, so I have no time for podcasts. So I don't know if the Charles C.W. Cook podcast has covered Sydney Sweeney yet, but I'm curious as to your opinion on the controversy.
I haven't done it on my podcast, but we talked about it on the editors, and I did write about it. What do I think about it? I think it's completely insane, is what I think. The ad is pretty much in line with traditional American commercials, especially for fashion products, in which attractive women and men are used to move produce. That's basically all there is to it. The pun, jeans and jeans, not especially clever, it's not offensive, is implying what we can all see, which is that Sydney Sweeney is very attractive. She's got good genes. Some people are prettier than others. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are taller than others or better at baseball than others. We all know this. To jump from there to this notion that American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney, for some reason that is never explained, are trying to peddle Third Reich era eugenics is just utterly baffling to me. And I've been pleased to see that although it got some traction on the left, American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney don't seem to care at all.
No, and neither do Americans. If anything, I believe that there might be even a little marketing going on and generating some controversy in order to draw attention and more free airplay for this. Attachment question. The Democrats they gained the very approved number in Gallup of 8%, the lowest they've ever got. Is it in part because of woke?
Sure. They're annoying. People understand that they're annoying. And look, it's true that this was not an argument that was made by a Democratic president, but far too much of the apparatus that people associate with the Democratic Party jumped on board. This argument was made in the Washington Post in earnest. It was made in the New York Times. It was made on Good Morning America. And what you haven't seen is lots of elected officials come out and say, I don't believe that, that's silly. They're still worried that they're going to be primaried from the left. So, yeah, this isn't the Democrats' view, but it is a view that is associated with the Democrats and that they've done very little to dispel.
I think that, by the way, you just put your finger on it. The worry about being primaried from the left, which traces its origins to AOC knocking off a longtime Democratic poobah, is what drives a lot of Democratic primaries. How long until that passes through the system, do you think, Charles?
Well, my view is always that they're going to have to lose a couple more elections, and I'm not sure they're going to lose a couple more elections. We're such a closely divided country, so it may be quite a long time.
Charles C.W. Cook. He has his own podcast. He's also the senior editor at National Review and is usually on the Editor's Podcast. Charles, I want to go back to tariffs because after Noah was on, I received an email. Now, it's a cliche that I always ask presidential candidates on stages and on interviews about American shipbuilding, about the Columbia-class submarine, about American sea power. One of my experts listened to Noah and he wrote this to me. I just listened to your interview with Noah Rothman. His adherence to classic free trade theory is infuriating. The shipbuilding sector is the perfect case study of what happens when you allow the global market to provide. We lost a heavy industrial capability, the price of our Navy doubled, and we found ourselves dependent upon people that were not dependable. We are investing in a key industry because we recognize it is critical to both our national security and our economic security. Now we will build ships and make money doing so. Then we will carry American goods on American-built, flagged, and crewed ships, and we will make money in a global trade. This is a Mahanist economy, and we forgot how to do that, but we are remembering it now under President Trump. Mr. Rothman lives in a theoretical ideal world, and I can't afford his idealism. I live in the real world, in the trenches, and I cannot afford his idealism. You're not Noah, but you kind of share Noah's point of view. What do you think?
Well, I share Noah's point of view in general, and I don't pretend to be an expert in this area. I think two things. The first is, I said in my initial answer, and I believe that there are exceptions to our preference for free trade, and national defense, as I said, is one of them. And I think that extends also to pandemics. So if it is the case, it's an if, but if it is the case that the United States has been put at a naval disadvantage by some slavish devotion to free trade, then that's a problem, and it's an exception that I would happily make. Now, I will say that there are some laws on the books that are nominally supposed to prevent this, say the Jones Act, but don't actually seem to have that effect in practice. So the theory and the practice don't run in just one direction. It's not just the free traders who fall down holes there. But you know, if we are talking here about, for example, not buying technology from China when we're building aircraft. Yeah, I agree. If we are talking about making sure that we are able to produce military materiel and that we need to violate the free trade rules to do that, I'm absolutely on board with it. I would want to see an analysis to make sure it was a good idea, but I don't have some sort of ideological opposition to that.
So the one step I go further is that we protect freedom of navigation around the globe. So if we hit every country with a 10 or 15% tariff, some of our consumers will bear that, but some of their industries will bear that. That's the subsidy we demand from the people who will import to our country for freedom of the seas that make shipping so cheap. Will you buy that one step further? I don't want to go higher than 15%, but I don't mind charging that as the global tax for what we do.
If that worked perfectly and there wasn't a retaliation and there wasn't a global trade war and Americans didn't end up paying a lot more for imports, sure. But I don't think it's at all guaranteed that that's going to happen. And so it seems that just as likely is that we're going to end up continuing our role as the global hegemon navally, which I think is great. I'm glad the British Empire segued into the American naval norm, and Americans are going to end up paying more to buy stuff from other places. So I don't think one necessarily follows.
Right, there is a story this morning in the Wall Street Journal by former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. I'll have him on Monday to ask him. He suggests a grand bargain is in the offing with China. Robert's a very good friend of mine, as close as I have one. I'm going to argue with him on Monday that that's a bad idea. We can't trust the Chinese. What do you think?
I think we can't trust the Chinese. I'm absolutely with you. This is not like dealing with the United Kingdom or Germany or France. This is a nation that has domination of the globe as its desire. That doesn't mean that it's immediately going to try and affect that. It understands its relative position to the United States, but any negotiations with them have to be undertaken on the understanding that they don't want to be a partner of the United States. They want to be the superior to the United States. So I'm with you on this.
Last question. You were originally a Brit. You're now an American. I'm so disappointed in France, Great Britain, Canada, and Australia on Israel. In fact, I wonder if the West is coming apart. And I really do. If they can't get this, Israel is a strategic ally of ours, probably our strongest. They defend the West on the point of the spear in the Middle East against Iran. What do you think about what these four countries have done?
I actually find it almost impossible to work out why they have done it and what they think they're going to get from it. I don't think it is true that these countries hate themselves or the West. I do think that they are wildly underconfident. I think they are easily manipulated. I think that there is a streak of contrarianism and anti-Americanism in this. But to be honest with you, I don't understand it. I've been thinking about this all week. France comes out, says we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. Why? I'm baffled.
Well, I'm baffled, but I do understand they have large Muslim minorities that are growing, and they are free vote people, and Macron and Starmer. But Starmer won. The guy up north, whatever his name is, the new guy won. Macron is a lame duck, and I don't know what's going on in Australia. Do you think it's demographics or is it dumbness?
I think it's dumbness. I think it's ideology. I think it's this sort of soft left progressive worldview that is seeped in a lot of those countries that sees the world as a series of hierarchies and that puts the Israelis at the bottom of the hierarchy because they're rich and powerful to an extent, although threatened, and they're deemed to be white for the purposes of progressive racial classification. I think that's much more of it than demographics, although you make a good point. I think the demographics don't help.
Okay. Charles C.W. Cook, thank you as always. Have a wonderful weekend. Follow Charles on X at Charles C.W. Cook with an E at the end. Make sure you read everything you can. Listen to his podcast. Listen to the editors from National Review. Also want to remind all of you, we are helping Texas through Food for the Poor, which is sponsoring a campaign. It has been wildly successful because ours is a generous audience. Everything you contribute via the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. Help Texas. Or if you want to call 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. Any amount is appreciated. all of you who have given, thank you. For those of you who thought you were going to give and then you haven't yet given, please take a time today or when you're driving or when you get home. 855-359-4673, $25.50, $100. We're still getting donations every day, and that money is going right down to San Antonio and right down to the victims of the Hill Country flood and the terrible tragedy there. Thank you in advance. Former President Biden stumbled onto the stage again last night at the National Bar Association. I just view this as the National Bar Association giving money to the former president. Cut number 13.
My friends, we need to face the hard truth of this administration. And that has been
we can't hear them. It's too bad. The audio's messed up, and he's messed up as well. Does cut 14 work?
Courts matter. The law matters. And the Constitution matters. I think a lot of Americans are starting to realize that under the pressure we're under now with this guy we have as president. Oh, get ready, folks. This is just starting. I'm proud I've appointed judges doing their best to be independent, fair, and impartial, respecting the rule of law and upholding the Constitution. I wish I could say the same for the executive branch, who seems doing his best to dismantle the Constitution. Oh, I'm being deadly earnest, man.
I'm being deadly earnest, man. I don't know if we can get cut number 13 better because he's shouting there. Gavin Newsom, meanwhile, the governor of California, being completely honest with a Jack Cacciarella podcast. You know, I've invited the governor on 20 times. He said yes 20 times. He never shows up. Cut number 15.
How far are you willing to go to stop Trump from stealing the midterms?
What's so interesting about how blue that is, that was done by an independent redistricting commission. That's the difference. We tried to play by a higher value system. It's about formal authority. It's also about moral authority. We tried to be both and. Yeah. I've long supported independent redistricting. I can't stand these gerrymandered districts. I can't stand the fact that we're trying to find, it's, everything about gerrymandering needs to be addressed nationally. Yep. And I now realize that as a promoter to do it at the state level, I thought other states would follow suit because it was the
Let me stop him. If he was on my show, I'd say, now, Governor, we all know that the independent commission isn't independent. It's a trick, and it's stacked with Democrats, and the independents are Democrats. So let's just be honest. It's already a gerrymandered state. You can't gerrymander it anymore. Let me do the market report brought to you by our friends at American Federal. It's a rotten day as we go into the close. The Dow is down 1.25%. The S&P is down 1.5%. The NASDAQ is down over 2%. And gold went up to $3,413 an ounce, up $64 and nearly 2% today. American Federal, are you finally going to buy some gold? 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Or go to AmericanFederal.com. I buy gold every year. I put it away in my safety deposit box. The Federal Mrs. Hewitt knows it. I know it. We know where it is. And we can get it if we have to in an emergency. But mostly I do it for diversification. Nick Grovich and his team have been buying and selling gold. They will sell you gold. They will buy your gold. All you have to do is call them. $3,413. Earlier this week, it was at $3,322 an ounce. So call Nick and his team and find out how to invest in gold. Buy it by the ounce with a commission. That's the smartest way. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. It's Friday. That means we are lucky when Ben Domenech joins us. He is host of the Big Ben podcast. He's editor-at-large for The Spectator, Fox News contributor, friend of the program. Ben, I have all 7 grandkids here, so I didn't listen to Big Ben this week. I have no idea what you talked about, but you tell me if I know, but I'm going to get to Sydney Sweeney. I'm betting you talked about Sydney Sweeney. Am I right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Sydney Sweeney. I talked about John Brennan. I talked about Fantastic Four, and I talked about the Steele dossier, and I talked about the Terry McLaurin contract situation, which was very perturbed.
Did you talk about Emmanuel Classe and the betting scandal in Cleveland yet?
I have not talked about that yet, but I do find it somewhat amusing.
Oh, it's terrible. And the terrible thing is he's a great young kid, and he's going to be banned for life if he's involved in this. But let me begin with something you didn't talk about because it happened this morning. Jon Stewart took to the airwaves, cut number 9.
Again, this is them trying to police and create rules that they would never follow. The idea that by having what may be a more left-leaning or progressive bent or just bringing in, that's how Fox is popular. That's how any of these people, they all talk about Gutfeld's the most popular. Yet he's not popular because he's a both sides guy. He's not, a fair use like, the fairness doctrine says, like he's relentless. And, after a day of watching Fox News and being bathed in their very purposeful propaganda, it's a great way to top off the night. But it's not the Jay Leno, like, I don't understand. I mean, why you want to offend your audience? Why not just do a show about, why do you have to talk about things you believe? Why do you have to make jokes about things you actually think? And I'll just say, I'm just going to go throw myself down.
So, Ben, what I wrote about this is what's worse, that Jon Stewart believes this nonsense and is this dumb or jealous, or both, or that he doesn't and is doing fan service. To repeat, Jon Stewart without a writer's room, and even with one, is not very funny, and he certainly isn't an informed or a serious intellect. He's a mediocre comedian who dominated for a few years when there was limited competition in his space. Now it's crowded and he's failing, and he's still not very funny. He's always welcome to come on this show and discuss the world with me. Courtesy is a prerequisite for me. Perhaps he could surprise, but doubtful. Key thing to know, Gutfeld is smart and very funny. That is why he succeeds. Your take on Jon Stewart.
So, it's interesting. I had conversations about Jon Stewart with my late father-in-law and with the late, great Don Rumsfeld about why they repeatedly did his show. And one of the reasons that they both cited to me was that he was a guy who self-staffed, who did his own research, that he was someone who actually read the books in question or the documents in question, the articles in question, and that he was prepared when he came to the interview. And I think you can actually see that. If you go back, you can watch, I don't know if Comedy Central has eliminated it from their website. Unfortunately, they've cut back on a lot of things. But there's an old interview with Rumsfeld where it's about a 30-minute extended version of it, where they're talking about Iraq. And it's actually an informed discussion. It's something where you feel like, Stewart is coming to it as someone who's actually paid attention to what's going on. That's good. What's better is being funny. And unfortunately, to your point, and I saw that you tweeted this out, I think I either retweeted it or like that, I can't remember, that him without his writer's room, oh my gosh, the drop-off is immense. This is not a guy who can really just come up with stuff on the fly the way that Louis C.K. and Dave Chappelle and so many other great comedians who are currently active can do. And look, the truth here is that Greg Gutfeld is higher rated because he is funnier than the people who are on these main line old guard programs. And that's something that is an indictment of those programs, because Greg's doing it with 10% of the amount of staff for his show that these guys are doing it. And for all these folks, they're just completely overpaid. They're completely overvalued. They do not actually represent the interests of the American people. And look, I think that one thing that's going to happen here is that people are going to start realizing that they can actually get much funnier comedians at a much lower cost, and that they're going to be able to do a lot more with the basis. Look, there's no doubt in my mind that John Mulaney could host his show better than Jon Stewart can host his show, better than Stephen Colbert can host the shows, better than Jimmy Kimmel can host his show. He could do that tomorrow. And that's because he's just a funnier person. And I think that look, I like these shows. I like Dick Cavett. I like, the old Johnny Carson stuff. I love these old interviews. I still watch old Conan interviews. I've said to you before. But part of the reason that you watch these things is because they're funny. And it's not just because of their ideology. I think that they're all, maybe not Carson, but they're all generally left of center. And it's one of these things where the fact that they don't appreciate that this is about a measure of humor as opposed to a measure of ideology is an indictment of their whole understanding of the role of late night in America.
Now, by the way, ideology doesn't disqualify you from being funny. I think the funniest show anywhere right now is Ruthless. And Ruthless is hilarious. And it's also extremely well informed by 4 veterans of the Hill who know what they're talking about. And so they can go from being very funny and talking about their parlay, which you should never play, Ben. Never play the Ruthless parlay. It's the worst parlay. I think it's the Bengals, the Colts, the Vikings, and the Panthers, right? It's the worst parlay ever. They only get worse if I ever guest hosted and they added the Browns. But but that's funny, right? They know everything and they're smart. I just think the left is getting dumber and dumber, and it's that simple.
Well, but see, I want to point out something, which is that Bill Burr is very funny. Dave Chappelle is very funny. Louis C.K. is very funny. All those guys are left of center. Maybe Nate Bargatze is a Republican. I don't know his politics exactly, but and Shane Gillis clearly leans more to the right. But the point is that it's not about your ideology. It's about you meeting us where we want you to meet us, which is making us laugh at the end of the day.
Did you see Shane at the end at the ESPYs?
Is the problem?
Was it Shane Gillis who did the ESPYs?
Yes.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
And he didn't even say it. The line was implied.
Yeah. No, I mean the point is just get back to making us laugh. That's all we actually want from you. As we don't go to a rock, sort of performance to hear you lecture us about Gaza, and we don't go to a comedian performance to hear you lecture us about what we're doing wrong about COVID and why we need to wear a mask.
All right. Well, we're going to get to Gaza in the next segment. We got to get to Sydney Sweeney now. Mary Catherine Ham explained it for me. It's not my demo. I apparently had seen one movie that she had been in. She is gorgeous. I have looked it up.
You are a straight man. She's in your demo.
Well, I know, but I was unaware of her, and she is absolutely gorgeous. She's Farrah Fawcett for the 25s, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. What Farrah Fawcett was to my generation, she's going to be for this generation of teenagers. Why did they do this to themselves?
The Democrats, I don't know why they keep stomping on themselves like this. They don't need to make these things political issues. They don't need to turn this into some kind of finding some Nazi dog whistle in a freaking ad. Just because the
jeans ad
is blonde and has blue eyes. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And look, Clay Travis had, I think a good line about this, which is just about, Democrats declaring war on boobs. But one of the things that I think is clear that's going on here is they just get triggered by virtually everything that goes against their worldview about the way things ought to be. And there were a lot of ads and ad campaigns that ran in recent years that were about body positivity and things like that. And now the fact that, one organization has said, let's get back to something that is a little bit more akin to the kind of ads that we ran in the 80s and the like, that's something that's going to be good.
I know why an ex-person might post something to attract attention, but I'm going to talk with you in the break about this. The premise is some grifter on TikTok or X wants to attract attention, so they say something stupid. The question is, why does Good Morning America pick it up? That is
exactly. That's the
why.
Part.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ben, did we learn? I saw there were stories about Russia, and new findings in the Durham Annex and all that. I really don't have time this week. I've got 7 grandkids here. Did we learn anything new? Are you stunned by it? You are a very good level about whether or not I should notice.
Look, I think that it's not so much that we learned huge new things. I think it's just that we confirmed things that we suspected, namely that those associated and very close to Hillary Clinton, including many of her supporters, donors, biggest supporters within politics, had significant roles to play within the way that the whole Russia thing played out. And look, I don't think there's a legal consequence to this, unfortunately. I think that this is a situation where, this is just going to have to stand as an indictment of the lies that we were told by so many people for so long. But the most important thing for me, in all of this, is that we don't let the Adam Schiffs of the world get away with gaslighting America anymore about the nature of what actually went on and the degree to which they lied to us about what was behind the scenes. To me, it's incumbent upon members of Congress and members of the cabinet to be honest to the American people, to be upfront about what is actually going on. And unfortunately, in this case, it looks like they lied to us repeatedly, and that they did so, having full conversations behind the scenes that were indicative of that willingness to
okay,
lie.
to that point, to that question,
Yeah.
what is going on? Why is Mike Waltz not confirmed? We're confirming like inspectors for OSHA right now, and we aren't confirming Mike Waltz when the UN is
Yeah.
screwing up everything. What is going on?
I do not understand that either, Hugh, and it's something that I think is kind of hanging over this. We need to have him in that role as quickly as possible, and I think it's something that would be a profound help to America's role in leading the world and having a voice on the international stage that can condemn some of the things that are going on there. And look, I think this is a situation where the Senate has had to do essentially yeoman's work, pushing so many things through in a very quick manner. As many other people have commented, this is a presidency and an administration that has accomplished so much in a very short amount of time. I mean, there's really no comparison historically in terms of what
We're going to come back and talk about Gaza, and I think President Trump ought to call up John Thune and say, John, put Waltz on top of the list. I need him. We got our allies going south
agree.
on Gaza.
No, I agree, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we need to have a strong voice in that role. And look, I understand that it's mostly about messaging, but it's an important message to send, and that's why he needs to be top of the list.
Ben Domenech is my guest. We talked during the break why Michael Waltz ought to be immediately confirmed to the UN. It comes down to this. Donald Trump needs him as part of the team. Special Envoy Witkoff has done a great job. So has Ambassador Huckabee. Donald Trump has done a great job. But we're at a crossroads. Today they were in Rafah. Our allies are going south on us. England, France, Australia, Canada, they're all confused about Israel. Ben, what do you think the Jewish state does next, and why should they do it?
Well, I'll answer. Firstly, I want to say the announcement from Keir Starmer, from Macron, from Justin. At the
new guy,
entire,
Mark, whatever his name is.
Sorry,
Carney.
In the entire Western frame, there should be no breaking with Israel at this particular moment, and the fact that they are doing it, I think, is both unacceptable and morally corrupt. And I do not. I wish that we had a loud voice out there calling them out on this, because I think that it's a betrayal of everything that they've said in the past, and really a craven attempt to play to the far left within all these different countries that have made this such a primary issue for their existence and advanced such propaganda as handed down by Hamas about what's actually going on over there. Secondly, I think the fact that they're doing this now makes Israel more emboldened, in the sense that, okay, well, if you're going to do it this way, we really are standing alone, perhaps, with the support of America, but, not all of it. And we're going to have to stand up and make our case to continue to exist as a nation, because we understand that this is an existential threat. And unfortunately, I think that that's going to result in the loss of a lot more human lives. But look, Hugh, we've been observing this so long. We kind of saw this coming, right? I mean, there were tendencies in this direction in the left, in each of these nations. But to do it right now, the timing in particular, just seems to be the height of irresponsibility as a leadership class for all of these neoliberal, effectively, leaders. I guess Starmer, I don't know if you're going to call him that, but the point is, they are picking a time to go in this direction that could not be more damaging to the overall international cause of Israel, and that is catering to the people and the propagandists who have advanced this narrative that Israel does not have the right to pursue a military agenda that is in their interest.
Yeah, President Trump said to do this is to reward Hamas, and he wasn't going to do it. I think he's right. And I think now Israel has clarity about who its friends are. And I think actually it's a crisis for the West, because that's NATO plus Australia right there turning its back on a strategic ally of NATO and the United States. And I think it's a crisis for the West that will play out. But Haviv Rediger was on the program this week, and he said for the first time since 10/7, it is tragic. There are 20 human beings who are alive in the hellholes that Hamas has built, but we have to destroy Hamas. In other words, hostages come second. They're not equal. We have to destroy Hamas, which is, by the way, the Palestinians don't have a future if Hamas is left with 15,000 people in the tunnels, even if it's only 25% of the territory. Do you agree that Israel has to say hostages are beneath the destruction of Hamas right now?
Well, we talked last week about this a little bit, and I think that this is something that was going to have to come at a certain point, because Israel put those hostages obviously front and center, and it was natural and organic for people to elevate their importance in terms of trying to rescue them. But nation states have to make decisions that are about the future of the nation state, and I think that includes the willingness to go after and destroy the enemies of a country, even if it puts some of this at risk. It's very sad. I mean, Hugh, it's an absolute tragedy. But Hamas brought this on themselves, and they continue to bring it on themselves. They intended to bring it on themselves. And, look, I think that there has been such a shift in terms of the policy toward Israel, the attitude towards Israel in the last 2 years, that I think this is one where they have to take this moment at this opportunity that they have to actually end an existential threat to them, and I do not judge them for it.
All right, last question. Do you think it is possible that conservative free traders like me, because it's happening to me, I don't know if it's happening. I had Oren Cass on yesterday. I've talked to Charles C.W. Cook and Matt Continetti and Noah Rothman about this, are going to come around to the idea that a baseline tariff is necessary because we protect the freedom of the seas and we're getting taken advantage of by the world?
Well, look, you know what I think about tariffs. I think they're stupid.
I know.
I think that they're a negotiating point in terms of an interaction with someone who you want to come to the table to open up their markets for free trade. Unfortunately, I think that you and I are on the short end of this at the current moment within the right. They certainly have embraced the tariff agenda as being one that they think works. I don't know that it's going to work long term. It has proved less damaging than a lot of us expected in the short term. But I do think that one of the things that is true is that there are a lot of nations that were taking advantage of our situation, taking advantage of our marketplace, and the president understands that. And this was his weapon to use, a very blunt instrument, unfortunately.
Well, this is I mean, he's pushing me to, he's right. I didn't know Japan didn't take our rice. I didn't know the UK and EU wouldn't take our beef.
Yep.
And moreover, we protect the freedom of the seas, and they don't meet their 2%. Now they're not going to meet their 5% in NATO, and now they're turning against Israel. Maybe it's time to lay a tax on these people. And I know the argument that we end up paying it ourselves. I just don't buy it because we have the market dominance.
Yeah, I think we have the market dominance, and I think that Americans are actually willing to bear some of those prices, just given the context of the world as it is today. But one thing that I do think is very critical here is the president has made these repeated bets, and trying to handle so many different deals all at once, making them all work, is going to be a very high stakes game, and we have no guarantee that it's going to work out.
How much capacity do you think Scott Bessent has as well as the president? Because I think he's pretty doggone smart.
He's got to be on constant high-test Red Bull, my friend. Like not the kind they sell in your 7-Eleven, the stuff you get from overseas that has twice as much caffeine.
I'm very impressed by him, though. I had never heard of him. Literally never heard of him, and he is so smart.
Yes, he is. And I think he's doing as good of a job as he can in the current role. We'll see how long he stays in it. Otherwise, I think the latest job numbers revisions could have Jerome Powell headed to the exits.
Oh my goodness, he better. It's too late. Might be the best nickname yet. Ben Domenech, thank you so much. Listen to the Big Ben podcast. Like and subscribe. I may miss it for a couple of weeks while I'm on granddaughter and grandson duty.
I forgive you. I forgive you, Hugh.
But I will listen. I will catch up. And in the meantime, follow him on X at B Domenech. Read him in The Spectator. See him on Fox News. I'm glad they invented the internet, because now I'm able to say I haven't got the bandwidth, and people understand what I mean. I've got 7 grandkids, the majority of whom are 3 and under, and they're all here with me up north with the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt. So I haven't got the bandwidth to keep up with my friend Eli Lake, who is a contributor to the Free Press. He's also the host of Breaking History, one of the great podcasts out there. And the new Breaking History is about Russia, which Eli taped with Josh Hammer. Now, I haven't had time to listen to it yet. I have glanced over and seen headlines that there's news about Russia, but I really don't have any time. I'm focused on Israel and trade, Eli. What do I need to know, and do I need to listen to this and ought everyone to care about Russia? What's going on?
There have been, in the last 2 weeks, a series of declassifications that, for journalists like myself, who have been covering this story very closely now for going on almost a decade, are really interesting and revealing. I'm not where Matt Taibbi and a couple other journalists at the Federalist are. I don't think these are, super bombshells. I'm critical, or I should say, I don't think that it was wise to imply that Barack Obama had been part of a treasonous conspiracy. As we both know, treason is the one crime defined in the Constitution. I don't think it meets that. But all of that said, I think the latest disclosure, which was on Wednesday, is really important. It's the in the following sense, it's the declassification of an annex to John Durham's 2023 report. It gets into some very tantalizing intelligence that he doesn't quite know what to make heads or tails of. But the one takeaway that you see in this annex is that the FBI got intelligence from a source that said a number of things, including that Loretta Lynch, who was then the Attorney General, was regularly briefing a senior person on the Hillary Clinton campaign about the status of the investigations into Hillary Clinton. That may end up being hearsay and not true, but the point is that there was zero investigation into this piece of intelligence.
Well, pause and repeat what it was that the Attorney General of the United States. Go ahead, tell me.
There were 2 reports from a source for the FBI, who was appears to be a Russian national, and what it said was that based on hacked emails, Loretta Lynch, who was the Attorney General, was briefing a member of Hillary Clinton's campaign on the status of the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton, which is a huge conflict of interest. As you probably remember, just one meeting between Lynch and Bill Clinton was enough
on the tarmac.
On the tarmac. That was that. So that's an explosive allegation. It's kind of been known, but now we see the actual report. It's finally declassified, and it also said that Hillary had developed a plan much earlier than we thought, starting in the beginning of 2016, to smear Trump with ties to Russia as a way to deflect from her own email scandal, which was obviously a big thing in 2016. This piece of intelligence, these 2 pieces of intelligence, as I say, John Durham, who I trust, says he can't determine whether they were real or not, and he gets into extensive, evidence in this annex about who he's interviewed, and various people at the FBI thought different things. But my takeaway is that this was not investigated by the FBI, and it's part of a pattern, Hugh. Meaning, there were a lot of investigations, not just the emails, in 2016 into Hillary Clinton. There was investigations into the Clinton Foundation. There was an investigation that started in 2014 into a foreign donor who wanted to influence the election by giving a lot of money, through other kind of dummy donors to Hillary Clinton's campaign. These investigations were slow-walked. In some cases, they were shut down. No aggressive steps were taken during the election. Compare that to the turn over every rock, find whatever you can, whatever sticks approach to investigating the Trump campaign. And then compare that to Jim Comey's decision to confirm that there was an investigation into the Trump campaign in March of 2017, when in fact, at that point, we know from previous reports from the Inspector General of the Justice Department and Durham himself that the FBI had nothing, that the investigation should have been shut down, and that there were senior FBI agents who had tried to shut it down and recommended closing these investigations into the sitting president. So that to me is the story. That's the scandal in a nutshell. There was a double standard when it came to Trump in 2016.
Eli, I said going into the break, I want to ask you, I don't want to go any further into 2016, except for Brennan's testimony in 2023, because the statute of limitations has run on everything else. What's your position on that?
My position is that unless there's a really shocking revelation, then I think it would be best to sort of accept that, you know, in the end, Trump secured his vengeance by winning the 2024 election. And I'd like to get out of the lawfare business. I think it was a disgraceful thing when, you know, the investigations were politicized against Trump and that politics were criminalized under Biden with Trump. And I don't think that that's how we resolve our political disputes in this country. And I think that I think that the Trump administration should sort of take the higher ground. I know that I might be talking into the void there, but I just think it would be better for the Republicans.
No, I make the same argument. Unless they got Brennan cold on lying to Congress.
Yeah.
I mean, cold. I would leave it alone. Right. Now, Eli, in terms of the investigation into Biden, about which we don't know much, what do you think about that one?
That is a scandal. It needs to be addressed. Absolutely. And it's because the auto pen stuff, those were auto pen signatures for kind of almost blanket clemencies for lots of people. And if the president wasn't fully there, I think the American people need to know this. I think that there needs to be reforms. And to me, I can't stop thinking about this scandal. It's like we sort of already knew, and everything coming out is confirming it. But that's scary, the idea that the president was making these kinds of decisions. And you remember at the time, some of them didn't add up. Like, how did this person get them? There were people who looked like they shouldn't have gotten the pardons and the clemency at the time, I remember. And Biden apparently wasn't there. These were done by the auto pen.
He was run by staff, and it does shock me. And I got Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson on the program, and we walked through the book. I'm not interested in Jake's double standard and whatever people say. I'm interested in the fact that everybody knew. That's in Jake's book. Everybody knew at fundraiser after fundraiser and event after event and meeting after meeting, Congress,
that
senators,
book is more. By the way, that book is more damning than the critics have said. I think it's very damaging to.
Well, that's why I did my interview with him. I went through it piece by piece, and Mark Halperin got mad at me for not yelling at Jake Tapper. I don't care. I want to know. I want people to know what's in there. It's a damning book. It's really good.
I agree with you. It is right. Yeah.
Eli Lake is my guest. He's the host of the Breaking History podcast, which is fabulous. He's a contributor to the Free Press, where he's a columnist, which is great. You ought to subscribe to the Free Press. They signed Haviv Reddy-Gur as their chief Middle Eastern correspondent this week, which is a great thing. I had Haviv on the show this week. And Eli and I agree, by the way, that Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book is very, 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 very explosive, and people ought to read it no matter what they think of Alex or Jake, because it's just got the details on Joe Biden's decline that nobody else has. Now, Eli, what Haviv said, and I wanted to get your reaction to, is we are at the critical juncture, we, including the United States and Israel. Do they destroy Hamas, or do they stop the war until the hostages get out, which will be in 20 years? Or do they carry on the war and destroy Hamas at the risk of the hostages, all 20, dying? Haviv said Hamas must be destroyed. What do you say?
I think, sadly, it's a tough choice, but I think you have to destroy Hamas. I think it's very important. I want to just commend you. That was just such an illuminating interview with Haviv Reddy-Gur, who is brilliant on these things and is so thoughtful, and I think he has so much integrity. And you did a great job of sort of teasing out all this stuff. I thought it was great. It was great. You covered a lot of ground. I recommend everybody watching the clip on YouTube. It's like 45 minutes. Terrific.
Well, thank you. Haviv is Michael Oren and Haviv are my go-to guys. Amit Segal might join them for Israelis. because they actually do wrestle with the issues and they have big hearts. They don't want Gaza to suffer. But, you know, Gaza's never going to get anywhere if they've got 15,000 terrorists left after 30,000 of them have been killed. There's still 15,000, even if they're teenagers with guns. They're going to run the place if Israel withdraws. Do you agree with that?
I would say this. 2 months ago, I had a glimmer of hope when you saw videos from Gaza of, and you still can find these, lots of Gazans blaming Hamas for this catastrophic decision to sacrifice the civilians they purport to govern in the name of their sort of forever jihad against Israel. And I think that average Gazans, it would be great if there was some way that they could throw off the remnants of Hamas themselves. And in that respect, that's the kind of solution that I'd like to see. And I think that it's less knowable than some of the experts, especially in Washington, have said, because I don't think we can possibly know in a fear-based society like Gaza what people really think. But we do have a lot of evidence in that regard. But that said, you can't have Hamas still standing. And it's really significant in this very bad week for Israel with, you know, the French and the English and the British, you know, saying they're going to recognize a Palestinian state, which is meaningless, but also dangerous because it sort of rewards Hamas for October 7th. You also had the Arab League statement with Qatar, importantly, saying it's time for Hamas to leave, relinquish power, and disarm, and blaming them for the catastrophe of October 7th. You could say, okay, that's nearly 2 years too late, but at the same time, I'll take it. That is a really significant thing. And it's interesting that the Arabs are much more kind of tethered to reality than the kind of Democrats in American politics and the Europeans who claim to be in solidarity with Palestinians are.
It's such a deep crisis in the West. People don't realize what a crisis in the West it is.
Yeah.
Israel's our strategic ally. It's the strategic ally. It is part of the West, and the West is dividing over this left-wing craziness. Eli, my last question is a personal one. I'm not Jewish. I'm not an Israeli. You're not an Israeli. You're Jewish. How often do you think about the hostages in the tunnel? I try and remember them every day, but I just don't know what it's doing to the psyche of American Jewry as well as Israelis.
Well, I'm close to it because I cover it, so I think about them a lot. I don't know if it's every day, but I do think about the hostages, and it can make you crazy because you feel helpless. You know that there's a kind of real cruelty to this organization, and they delight in it and they advertise it. I'm thinking of that horrible ceremony where they had the coffins for the two Bebas children, or they lied to that one father and they, you know, said you're going to meet your wife when they'd already knew that they'd slaughtered her. These are people who specialize in both physical and psychological torture, and to know that there are these innocents who are still suffering there is a heavy burden a lot of times, and I can only imagine how Israelis feel or how Benjamin Netanyahu feels. I think he probably feels this really deeply. And
they're the closest thing to the Dementors that kids raised on Harry Potter will realize that's Hamas. They are psychopaths, and my gosh, they can't be left in power. Eli Lake, follow him on X at Eli Lake. Read him in the Free Press, and make sure you listen to Breaking History. Part 2 on Iran is coming up soon. Do not miss that. Eli, thank you. It's always good to talk to you on a Friday. Also got to remind people it is Friday, and so I want to remind you that you've got the weekend ahead, and you're probably a weekend warrior. And if you're a weekend warrior, you got to take Relief Factor. Relief Factor is what makes me go as far as I go and as fast as I go, which isn't very fast anymore, but I still get my miles in. And I'm able to keep up with a half dozen plus one grandkids doing a variety of different things. Stuff I don't normally do, but I feel great because I take Relief Factor. I had a bad hamstring at the beginning of the week. It's gone because I doubled down. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. I doubled down on Relief Factor for 3 or 4 days. Gone. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. I meet people whenever I go out. They say, I got Relief Factor. It got rid of my tennis elbow. Remember the guy in Cleveland in the middle of the row stopped me after said, tennis elbow was gone in 3 weeks. Because it helps your body's natural anti-inflammatory system with natural supplements. It's the only supplement I've ever taken in the last 20 years, and it is, without a doubt, I've taken it for more than 10 years, recommended by every doctor I ever know. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, and I really encourage you. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com, get their starter pack. $19.95 for 3 weeks, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com. Once again, I just got to go back and tell you, gold hit $3,413 an ounce today. Some of you say that's a reason not to buy. I say that's an indication that there's a new base and there might be a new peak. I don't recommend anything other than when you buy gold, do it from Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. And you can reach them at 800-221-7694, 800-221-7694, or go to their website, AmericanFederal.com. That's AmericanFederal.com, or call 1-800-221-7694. It was down as far as $3,320 this week, and I thought it might be a bottom given the way that the gold works. But $3,413 isn't a top. It's an indication that gold is going to remain in the headlines every day for as long as the world readjusts to the new world trading order, and it is a new world trading order. AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. It would not be Friday without the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. You know, there have been a lot of national scandals this week, but they can't hold a candle to California scandals. We have $30 billion in unemployment during COVID gone. We have the California high-speed rail, which is the Holy Roman Empire of scandals, because it can't be paid for by California. It's not high-speed, and to date, there are no rails. But the worst scandal is how we've dealt with the aftermath of the January fires. We feel for fire victims and all of their frustrations. When rock and rollers start to sing, we're moved to make donations. Celebrities assure us, between the songs and verses, the money we contribute will go straight to victims' purses. We reached into our pockets, donated what we could, then smiled with satisfaction, because we'd all had done some good. But this is California, and here the scams are greener. And in my life, I'll tell you, I've seen cesspools that were cleaner. Instead of resurrecting homes with walls and floors and soffits, they handed all the money to some interesting nonprofits. They built a lovely playground. Now, that should bring some smiles, but the place is empty as there's ash around for miles. The thing about this story that gives a person pauses, they said they'd help the victims and not a dozen causes. I don't wish to be counted with a group of rank contrarians, but funds should go to veterans and not to veterinarians. Now, in response to critics, they've hired legal elves and made the big announcement they'll investigate themselves. A law firm will do audits, which take months of execution and cost a lot of money. Could you make a contribution? That's Fire Aid by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, thank you for this. It's a scandal. And you know what else? Right now, Food for the Poor is raising money for the victims of the Hill Country flood and the Camp Mystic disaster. There's a Help Texas banner over at the top of HughHewitt.com. The reason we allow Food for the Poor to sponsor that is we know that they steward their money, and it's going to Texas. It's going there today. When I read that story about California, I'm shocked that there aren't people in the streets. They're all ruined. Gavin Newsom can't survive this. No one can. Is there any accountability? Do we know who's responsible for this?
Well, they are beginning their own investigation, which I'm sure, which will certainly point the finger at no one, which is what happens in California. I mean, the unemployment billions that went out were heavily investigated, and we have a final report. Nothing.
I want everyone to go to tarzanajoe.com and send everyone that poem, because everyone needs to know about the fact that the money raised for the California fire victims was diverted to non-California fire victims. It's just terrible. If you need a poem for any reason, including to expose scandal or to celebrate joy, marriage, anniversary, retirement, write to Tarzana Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.